Hey everybody, welcome to episode 163 of Fight Chat Friday. So today's video we're going to be covering again the minus 50 division in the senior female from the World Championships in 2013 from Tampere, Finland. So today's fight we're going to be looking at the overall winner of this division with Tyra Barada, and also opponent from Finland in her home country is from Nita Mettinen. So we're going to get stuck into this fight, show you guys the stats behind it, and also the differences that we've seen from last week's fight in the minus 50. So we're starting to gather some stats, as you guys know now. So it's good to be able to compare and see the differences and see if we can come up with any overall theories or pictures behind what's happening in the world of ITF.
So jumping right into this match, we have a higher tempo start from Tyra, right in blue, right in the beginning. And we're expecting to see that front leg very, very active and busy, having looked at Tyra for, quite a few years since her junior career. So that much won't surprise anybody. This is the kind of pattern that we're expecting to see emerge with Nita trying to time the drop of the leg and be effective off the hands.
Yeah, we see like she's trying to get to the hands, but Tyra's distance on the front leg is really, really good. And as well, she's well able to mix it up with the hands and able to launch in off that backhand blitz, which we don't see too often, which we go to so well again. And she's really effective at getting that left leg, particularly to the body, with a turning kick after hands. And that's a big, big shot and a big weapon for her. Gets caught with this third reverse punch, but we'll see in the stats later on, she ends up being quite effective with this technique.
Yeah, definitely. We have again another one of these matches where it's right plays left. And what this often does is it takes away something from Tyra, which is that hacks that she can be so efficient and so deadly with. So she instead has to look at taking the turning kick over the blind side. And in doing that, she would have to change her chamber slightly. So I think Nita sparring her with that left leg in front does slightly disarm the very, very best of what Tyra can do with that front leg.
Yeah, so far what we've seen as well is Tyra is very effective off that front leg. It's a big, big threat. But because it's such a big threat, then people tend to forget that her hands are actually really effective as well,
Yeah.
which allows her to set that up, give people something to think about with the leg, and it gives her an opportunity to sneak in with the hands herself as well, which she is very effective with.
Yeah, I quite like it that, everybody is going to be tempted. If you've been kicked at for a while, you want to throw a kick back into the mix yourself. And what Tyra's done very effectively is interact with that on the first time of asking. So a little bit like this here, she's reached to interact with the leg hasn't come, and Nita has gone to blitz, but Tyra's still slipped ahead and made the backhand punch count. So I think that willingness to interact immediately and not just give ground, but to take the ground with your front leg, and then as your opponent wants to kick back in, to invade the space and be willing to trade and go to that backhand. It does help her keep that advantage of ring position as well.
Yeah, speaking of ring position, this fight has very few warnings in the first round compared to what we usually see,
Yeah.
especially for the high volume of this fight. So far we have a lot of action, particularly off the front leg carries. We see Nita now is trying to turn up a little bit and put more pressure on from the start of round two, using to squeeze the space a little bit more and try get a little bit of momentum going, which she actually does quite well here. Now, granted, Tyra, I think she did have a little bit of a malfunction with the foot pad, but she did get through quite well, and it was probably her biggest success from the whole fight.
Yeah, we see every now and again a good front leg side kick or maybe a misjudged backhand from Tyra, and that leads to one of the early scores for Nita. But other than that, I think that in beating the front leg and getting through the hands was certainly her most sure route to victory if she can manage it. The challenge is, as we've always said, if you're going to focus on scoring, getting your main scores off hands, you cannot afford to be outworked. And Tyra did not take the foot off the gas and didn't really let Nita outwork her.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to see that come true again. All the fights we've looked at so far from the worlds, the fighter with the overall more work rate in terms of the contact, they're the person who usually wins. And Tyra, again, mixing up the front leg really well, but with actual side kicks at the end of it. And then mixing that, like we said, with the backhand or the blitz, whatever way you want to look at that. It's very, very effective off a direct side kick, particularly on the defensive side, like we see here. She kind of goes in, sucks Nita in a little bit, then takes a step back to create space, which allows her to run into that side kick that Tyra puts up as a fence.
Now, we did talk over the last few weeks about making a decision early on before it becomes too late while you can still influence the match. And Nita, with just over a minute to go, had recognized that the time had come to push. She was behind by 4 points on two of the cards, and the time had kind of come to put a bit of a push on. But it's sometimes what happens in that when it doesn't go your way and another score slips, all of a sudden it came from a match that was, let's say, not that even, but there wasn't that much in it. All of a sudden it becomes a 6 point game, and now it really is a lot of chasing.
Yeah,
That
and
said,
when you open up as well, Adrian, it allows for more opportunities, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
now the game isn't as tense, as there's risks being taken, which means there's more options for Tyra to open up and get some shots. But as you were just alluding to, I think as well, there is one flag that is still in play, and we look at that in the stats later. It's
yeah,
in play means it's still winnable for Nita. Now, not good enough for her to win the match. She still can't get a minimum of 2. So no good for her realistically at this period of the match. So a nice comfortable finish out for Tyra. She picked the right moments. We did a post this week on social media as well of things you need to be aware of in the dying seconds of a match to get the win. And
yeah.
she was definitely focused there as well on doing one thing particularly well, and that was fighting when she needed to and then moving when she needed to, not just sticking to one where she gave away some scores or else she just ran and gave away and conceded a lot of ground and scores as well on that. So she did a good job there finishing out, closing out the match to take the win nice and handy.
Yeah, and I think one thing that just worth reiterating is that her ability to take space off the front leg, but then stand and defend that space, I
Yeah.
think is something that has set her apart from a lot of the fighters that we've been watching the last few weeks. Most of them are quite happy to give up the space initially again. And so we get this to and fro, over and back kind of action. So Tyra taking the space and then standing and holding it some of the time taking the defensive side kick made her a little bit of a challenge to deal with there. Moving into the stats, Richie, you want to look at the something that's quite different from last week on the first two stats here.
Yeah, so on this one here, we see that the side kick is actually well up there again for Tyra in comparison to the carry, which is something that we've seen now in a couple of fighters who are they're known to be actually very good fighters. So in particular, Magomed, Tyra, and James. So far their side kick in comparison to their carry was well up there. So a lot of fighters have a big, massive carry score, but then their actual side kick is lower. So if you take notice of the light green bar, Tyra actually landed and made contact with more side kicks than she did with the carry, which is a big, big factor. Now, having said that, so did Nita. So that's something as
Yes.
well to be aware of. It doesn't guarantee you success by no means. You have to be able to pull it off with other variables within the context of sparring. But the turning kick is definitely making a return again, as we've alluded to. High counts on both sides there, particularly for Tyra off hands. She's getting in with the backhand really well and then putting a nice turning kick low onto the hip after that. We see a couple of attempts with the Hacks Goro, as you said, Adrian, not as easy to do on the particular facing that we have in this fight. We
Mhm.
have Nita again getting to hands as her main weapon off the side kick and carries, getting to hands where she can. But obviously, that was a big reason as well where Tyra was able to get some side kicks in because she used a lot of defensive side kicks, which gave her a nice high score on that. And then we have a couple of blitz attempts as well, and also the backhand, which is a big score and a big difference there for Tyra, which is something we tend not to see as often, particularly in the lower weights in the female divisions.
For sure.
So I think she stands out there as one of the only females there really utilizing and being effective with that technique.
I think one thing that's kind of slightly hidden in the stats, but might turn up a little bit as we look at the corners and the flags that were available and so on, is the fact that because Tyra tended to stay towards the middle and did her scoring from the middle out or from the middle retreating with the defensive side kick, it meant it was very clearly visible to all of the judges. So there wasn't much of this scoring happening
Good
buried in a
point.
corner. And so, in terms of, Nita has a fantastic work rate in there as well, and very level on everything except for maybe the carries, which weren't necessarily scoring anyway. But sometimes she was starting from buried in the edge of the ring or in the corner, or she was chasing Tyra into a corner and meeting the retreating sidekick. So I think just the positioning was probably quite important in this one as we go through it as well.
Yeah, so here we have a look at a little bit more detail of the work rate, etc. So we have contact made 19 to 33, and that was from an attempted 43 for Nita and attempted 59 for Tyra. So a little bit more work rate compared to the last week's fight, where it was a little bit more tentative. Contact rate much higher as well. Last week we had a 22% contact rate for both fighters. Here we have 44, and again that little bit higher of 56 from Tyra, which is quite impressive. Considering that she actually used the carry often as well to create some space and to create some ring position advantages. So still to have a 56 percentage there is quite impressive. So that's a one action every 5.7 6 seconds for Nita, and one action every 4.1 seconds for Tyra, which is quite good. Probably one of the highest rates we've seen so far from the females. Warning count quite low, didn't make a big impact in this fight. Restarts then as a result is a little bit lower as well. We tend to see an average in ITF sparring internationally in the competitive scene. We see the 12 to 13 range, here a little bit lower as 9. And that gives us the final little metric there. For every one shot that Nita attempted, Slovenia, which is Tyra, attempted 1.37. So a little bit more of a higher work rate. And of course, with the accuracy being a little higher as well, that resulted in her getting a much higher score and return, which we'll see a little bit more in detail here.
Yeah, so this is again our new stat that we've started looking into. So when we take the scores that were given out by the 4 corner judges for each person, you're going to get, and if you divide that by 4, you're going to get an average score on each flag. We can see 3.75 for Nita and 10.25 for Tyra, which is quite a huge score, considering the match wasn't by any means a blowout in either direction. Of course, the flags conceded is going to be the reverse of that, meaning that Tyra realistically across the 4 cards had a safety margin of about 6.5 points. Mostly built up in that last 60 seconds. So, a very, very impressive differential there. We're seeing both girls quite equal in terms of the number of techniques in use, but we are seeing critically Tyra being first to contact more often, or twice as often as Nita, which again, paired with that higher work rate, paired with that higher accuracy, does lead us to a position where you can kind of expect that she's going to finish higher up with the scores. Only one decision flip in this one, and at the end of the game, only one flag in play. And so what that means for us is there was only one time when the decision went from one person's favor to the other, and at the end of the match, there was only one of the umpires that was within 3 points of a draw. So for Nita, there was only one flag that was in play or that she could influence at the end. So all of this comes together to kind of show a slightly bigger margin of victory than what we looked at last week.
Yeah, so that decision flip of 1 just shows that Tyra was dominating the fight from start to finish. Never really in doubt. The safety margin of points as well, 6.5, shows us that the warnings didn't have any factor in this fight in particular. Yeah. But it is interesting to see when her average score is 10.5 or whatever it was, and then there was still one flag in play. That kind of alludes to the fact that maybe one of the refereeing decisions there wasn't so precise, or maybe not as accurate as you expect. So that also brings up that factor as well to be aware of. 3 judges there were quite close in their scores, giving Tyra a big advantage. On average 6.5, as we said, but there was one flag in particular which probably wasn't as accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. So folks, let us know what you think of these new stats, if there's things that you're finding interesting or useful, and in particular, if you find that it influences how you want to train or how you want to prepare or generates more questions. Let us know in the comments or let us know on our social media. We'd love to hear from you. Next week, we will be tackling again another match with some interesting lessons to learn, and we're very much looking forward to that. So until next week.
See you then.